Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Night was falling on the city's bustling streets, and the neighborhood seemed plunged into a strange torpor. A group of elegant but intimidating women spotted their prey, a young black girl, alone, walking with purposeful steps despite the palpable tension. Their contemptuous looks and sour whispers were enough to create an oppressive atmosphere. "Do you really think you can get through here alone?" one of them asked, a cruel smile on her lips. The girl didn't flinch. Her eyes, deep and calm, watched every move of her assailants as if anticipating their every attack. Unbeknownst to them, this young girl was no ordinary victim. Beneath her frail and reserved exterior lay an authority that commanded respect and fear in the most ruthless world. She was the leader of the region's military forces, a rank none of them would have dared to imagine. The first intimidations were followed by mocking laughter and threatening gestures, but barely had they taken another step before silence fell like a guillotine. In his eyes shone an icy intensity, that of someone who had led armies and made life-and-death decisions. The women, suddenly aware that they were facing someone far more powerful than themselves, hesitated, paralyzed by the unknown. This unexpected encounter would change their perceptions forever. The young girl said nothing, but the sheer weight of her presence was enough to remind her bullies that some strengths transcend fear and arrogance. The next morning, the city seemed normal, as if nothing had happened the day before. Yet for the women who had tried to intimidate the young black girl, the image of her, calm and implacable, still haunted their thoughts. Sitting in her plain but imposing office, the young woman, known to the civilian world simply as Lieutenant Kendra James, reviewed the day's reports. Her military reputation was known only to those who served her, and outside the military's inner circle, she remained invisible. A phone call interrupted his work. The voice on the other end was tense. "Lieutenant James, we have an incident in your neighborhood. Some people are trying to cause chaos." Kendra frowned. She knew exactly who it was. The women in the gang. They thought she was an easy target. They were about to find out, once again, that they were wrong. A few minutes later, she stepped out onto the street, dressed in civilian clothes but with a simple military badge on her belt, enough for those who could read the sign. The gang stood there, oblivious to who was standing in front of them. Kendra said nothing. A simple shake of her head, an icy stare, and the tension became palpable. The women, confused and nervous, exchanged glances. They had underestimated this young girl. And they would soon understand that the game was over. The first lesson was silent, but overwhelming. In this world, respect is not demanded. It is commanded. The gang waited, thinking they had it under control. But Kendra moved forward with a calm, sure step, each movement measured. Silence settled around them, heavy and oppressive. Even the morning light seemed to hold its breath. "So, you think you can walk here alone?" one of the women asked, trying to regain control with her usual arrogance. Kendra stopped a few feet away from them, her gaze blazing and implacable. "I don't think so. I know." Her voice was calm, but each word struck like a military order. The women exchanged confused glances. They didn't know what to do. Something about her inspired a fear none of them had felt before. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Kendra continued, her hand brushing the belt where her military badge glowed faintly. The effect was immediate. The gang leader, accustomed to intimidation and manipulation, felt genuine fear for the first time. The others instinctively recoiled, as if struck by an invisible force. Kendra took a step forward, each gesture perfectly calculated, and finished in a firm voice. "You just tested me. You lost. And trust me, you wouldn't want to know what it means if you did it again." The women, paralyzed, did not dare utter another word. The gang dispersed, not because Kendra had shouted or threatened, but because her presence alone imposed undeniable authority. As she continued on her way, Kendra felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who knows they've restored order. For her, this wasn't just a personal victory, it was a stark reminder that respect and power are not negotiable. And in his mind, one thought persisted: this was only the beginning. A few days later, Kendra was monitoring the city from her office when she received a disturbing report. The gang hadn't forgotten the humiliation. They were planning something, convinced they could surprise her this time. But Kendra never let herself be surprised. Calmly, she analyzed every detail, their habits, their recent movements, their contacts. Her military mind was already working to anticipate their every move. When the gang attempted to confront her again, this time in a secluded alley, they were greeted by a discreet display, cameras, a few trusted men, and the silent but overwhelming presence of Kendra herself. "You thought you could challenge me a second time?" she asked, her icy voice echoing through the alley. The nervous women realized too late that they had been trapped. Kendra didn't need to shout, threaten, or hit. Her strategy and reputation spoke for herself. The security forces she had discreetly contacted were already there, ready to intervene if necessary. One by one, they learned the lesson: intimidation doesn't work against someone who has commanded armies and made life-and-death decisions. Their gazes lowered, their arrogance reduced to ashes by Kendra's mere presence. As they were forced to leave, humiliated but happy to retain their freedom, Kendra watched in silence. She had restored order, not through brute force, but through intelligence, discipline, and unquestioned authority. For her, it wasn't a personal victory, it was a reminder that true power is manifested in control, wisdom, and courage. And that day, the entire town had learned, without a word being spoken, never to underestimate the one no one saw coming. After neutralizing the gang, Kendra didn't return to normal as if nothing had happened. She knew the real battle wasn't just being fought on the streets, but in people's minds. She began meeting young girls from the neighborhood, some intimidated, others already crushed by the pressures of the street. Kendra not only offered them protection, she gave them a concrete example: strength lies not in muscles or fear alone, but in self-control, courage, and determination. Every piece of advice, every gesture, every word she shared carried the weight of her military experience. The girls began to change. They stood up, spoke up, and decided to no longer let intimidation dictate their lives. On the streets, Kendra's reputation spread quietly but powerfully. Gangs, which had previously ruled by fear, began to think before they acted. The intimidation ceased, replaced by a silent, lasting respect. For Kendra, it wasn't about revenge, but about justice and example. She had learned that true leadership wasn't proclaimed with words, but with actions. And as the neighborhood regained a semblance of peace, a certainty formed in her mind: as long as she was there, no one would be left unprotected, and fear would never again dictate the lives of these young women. But in the shadows, Kendra knew that calm never lasted forever. New challenges were brewing, and she had to be ready. A few weeks after restoring order to her neighborhood, Kendra sensed a subtle shift in the air. Rumors were circulating of a new, more organized and dangerous group ready to exploit fear and chaos. This was no longer just a gang of arrogant women, it was a truly organized threat. Kendra knew that caution and strategy would be crucial. She began gathering information, observing their movements, and anticipating their plans. This time, she couldn't rely solely on her aura or authority, she needed tactics and a solid plan. The first contact was made in an abandoned warehouse, where the group had tried to sow panic. Kendra arrived silently, her eyes scanning every dark corner. When they saw her, the effect was immediate. Some hesitated, others laughed nervously, thinking she was alone. But Kendra had planned every detail. Her allies, chosen from among those she trusted, were positioned discreetly. In an instant, the group was surrounded, with no possibility of escape. "Do you think you can instill fear in this place?" Kendra asked, her voice calm but sharp. "You underestimated the person standing in front of you." Tensions rose, but this time Kendra didn't just intimidate them, she showed them the real consequences of their actions. Thanks to her strategy and precision, the group was neutralized without bloodshed. They left the warehouse, humiliated and knowing they could never match her discipline and intelligence. As she left, Kendra felt a mixture of satisfaction and responsibility. She had once again protected her neighborhood, but she knew it was just one battle in an ongoing war against injustice and bullying. The message that day was clear: strength lies not in inspiring fear, but in mastery, strategy, and courage. And Kendra, a military leader and protector of her neighborhood, was ready to defend these values to the bitter end. After neutralizing the organized group, Kendra knew that maintaining peace in the neighborhood would require more than force. It would require building a network of support and strong alliances. She began by identifying influential and respected people, figures who, like her, were committed to protecting the community. She met former soldiers, teachers, and even some members of the former reformed gangs. Each brought their own skills, strategy, surveillance, mediation, and above all, a sense of respect that she wanted to impose in the neighborhood. Together, they formed an invisible but powerful network, capable of reacting quickly to any threat. Meanwhile, Kendra continued to mentor the young women she had begun training. They were learning not only to defend themselves, but also to understand the value of leadership and discipline. Under her example, they were gaining confidence and courage, ready to face a world that had too often ignored their rights. But as the weeks passed, Kendra uncovered disturbing information. Some former gang members, humiliated and frustrated, were seeking revenge. Worse still, some higher-ups in the city, jealous of her reputation, were trying to quietly undermine her authority. Kendra smiled slightly. She had already faced fear, arrogance, and intimidation. Now she would face cunning and politics. But she knew one thing: with her allies, her strategy, and her discipline, nothing could stop her. As night fell over the neighborhood, Kendra stood atop a rooftop, watching the streets below. It was quiet, but she knew that with every victory came challenges. And she was ready to take them all on. A few weeks after consolidating her network, Kendra received disturbing news: the humiliated former gang members were seeking revenge. But this time, they weren't acting alone. They had recruited accomplices, hoping to take advantage of the element of surprise and the fear that certain rumors still circulated. Kendra wasn't intimidated. She knew every member of the gang, their weaknesses, their habits, and their limitations. With her allies, she devised a discreet but relentless plan. The goal was not only to neutralize them, but to show them that the fear they were trying to inspire was now useless. That evening, the gang attempted to attack a small local business to sow chaos. But Kendra and her team were already there, invisible, watching every move. When they took the first step, they fell prey to a surveillance and containment device she had prepared. "Do you think you can repeat your mistakes?" Kendra asked, emerging from the darkness like a towering shadow. Her voice was firm, icy, and each word resonated with the authority of a military leader. The former bullies immediately realized they had underestimated the person they believed to be weak. Kendra didn't raise her voice, didn't shout. Her mere presence, combined with the precision of her plan, paralyzed their intentions. Within minutes, the situation was under control. The humiliated and helpless gang realized that true power lies not in intimidation, but in strategy, courage, and self-control. As Kendra left the scene, the neighborhood returned to calm. Residents, silent witnesses to the confrontation, realized they could now walk without fear, protected by someone who embodied justice and discipline. In her mind, Kendra knew this wasn't the end. But for now, she had won a resounding victory. Fear had switched sides, and her neighborhood was beginning to learn what respect really meant. The neighborhood had returned to relative calm. Residents walked with confidence, the girls seemed stronger, and the old bullies were gone, at least on the surface. But Kendra knew that real danger wasn't always visible. Rumors circulated of secret alliances between certain gang leaders and influential figures in the city, ready to exploit fear for their own gain. Kendra quickly realized that the threat now came from the shadows, in a more insidious form: manipulation, corruption, and betrayal. Rather than engage in direct confrontation, Kendra used her strategic skills. She strengthened her support network, trained her allies to anticipate enemy movements, and created a discreet but effective surveillance system. Every street, every store, every park was now connected by an invisible web of vigilance and protection. One night, while making her rounds, Kendra intercepted a suspicious conversation between two henchmen. Thanks to her preparation and contacts, she neutralized the threat before it could even take shape. The men left, confused and frightened by the precision of her intervention. For Kendra, this victory was different. It wasn't about visible fighting or direct confrontation, but a silent triumph. Security and respect could be maintained through intelligence, planning, and natural authority. Looking out over the sleeping city from the rooftop of her apartment building, Kendra smiled slightly. The calm was fragile, but she was ready. As long as she was here, no shadow, no matter how insidious, could dominate her neighborhood. And deep down, she knew one thing: true power isn't just about defeating your enemies. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves, and transforming fear into respect and courage. One evening, when the city seemed peaceful, Kendra received alarming information. An allied group of former gang members and corrupt city figures was planning a grand move to regain control of the neighborhood. This time, it wasn't just intimidation. Their goal was to sow chaos and publicly humiliate any authority figure. Kendra knew the battle would be difficult. She gathered her team and developed a meticulous plan, neutralized the threat before it struck, while avoiding endangering the residents. Every detail counted: entrances, exits, communications, and possible reactions from the attackers. When the group arrived, expecting to surprise the neighborhood, they fell prey to a perfectly orchestrated plot. Kendra then appeared, calm and imposing, at the center of the confrontation. Her presence alone was enough to inspire respect and fear. "This is your final mistake," she declared, her voice resonating with icy authority. "You underestimated those you sought to crush, and you forgot that true power lies in strategy and self-control." The fight was short but decisive. Thanks to her planning and her team's efforts, the attackers' every move was anticipated. They were neutralized without bloodshed, humbled by Kendra's intelligence and discipline. The neighborhood, silent witnesses to the confrontation, finally realized that respect and safety were not earned through fear, but through competence and authority. After the confrontation, Kendra stood alone on the rooftop for a moment, watching the city. She knew that calm could be fragile, but she had proven that justice, discipline, and courage could triumph over fear and arrogance. The neighborhood was no longer just protected, it was transformed. The young girls she had guided now marched proudly, inspired by her example. And Kendra, military leader and protector of her community, knew that as long as she stood guard, respect and justice would prevail. That night, the city understood a simple but powerful truth: you don't challenge someone who has the strength, intelligence, and courage to stand up for what is right. Months had passed since the last confrontation. The neighborhood finally breathed a lasting calm. Residents walked with confidence, businesses flourished, and the streets were bathed in a new serenity. The name Kendra James, though discreet in the civilian sphere, circulated like a legend in the alleys and schools of the neighborhood, the one who had transformed fear into respect. Kendra, true to herself, sought neither fame nor public recognition. She continued to guide the young girls, teaching them not only to defend themselves, but to believe in themselves and their ability to change their environment. Every smile she regained, every proud look, was a victory greater for her than all the military battles she had fought. The once humiliated gang was gone, vanquished not by violence, but by the silent force of discipline and strategy. Threats had become rare, and those that dared appear were always neutralized before they could fully manifest themselves. One night, as she watched the city from the rooftop of her apartment building, Kendra felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had proven that true strength was not measured by intimidation, but by self-control, strategy, and protecting those in need. And as the streetlights bathed the quiet streets, Kendra knew one thing: as long as she was here, fear would no longer exist in her neighborhood. Respect, discipline, and courage had found their guardian, and the community she protected would never forget her. In the stillness of the night, one feeling resonated louder than anything else: sometimes, true power lies hidden in those we think are invisible, until they reveal themselves.